Welcome everyone as 13-year-old Praggnanandhaa takes on Super GM Sergey Karjakin. They shake hands and we are about to begin. It's 5 minutes plus 3 seconds increment per move, and Praggnanandhaa and Karjakin have had this race sort of. Karjakin became the youngest grandmaster in the world at the age of 12 years and 7 months, and Praggnanandhaa was trying desperately to beat that record. In the end, he missed it by a couple of months. But here they are fighting against each other, and this is going to be very, very interesting. Pragg in this tournament hasn't won a single game yet. This is round number 5. He's on half a point out of 4. He plays the Caro-Kann, d5. Karjakin takes the pawn, c takes d5, and plays a very simple line just to keep it simple against Pragg. No theory. And Pragg takes a bit of his time to figure out what exactly he wants to play. Does he want to develop his knight here, the bishop coming out? He decides to play his knight out to c6. This is a very standard position, and c4 would lead us to the Pano-Botvinnik attack, but Karjakin goes completely in a different direction. He goes bishop b5 and pins the knight. Now, main moves here e6, bishop g4, but Pragg goes a6. It's like he's telling Sergey, I don't really believe in your move. What are you going to do? Karjakin simply chops off the knight, b takes c6, and now Pragg has the bishop pair. But look at White's development. His knight is out. He's going to castle very quickly. He's going to hit the center. Actually, he goes knight e5 first. He's hitting this pawn, and now notice, what should Pragg do? There are defensive moves like bd7, queen c7, but a very active move is bishop f5. Because if you take, I go queen c7, and then you move your knight, I take your pawn. And this is very good position for black. So Pragg should maybe play bishop f5. A move like bishop d7 is too passive, but he plays it. And you can see immediately the bar moves in Karjakin's favor. White is clearly better now just because Pragg's bishop is too passive. And against a super GM like Sergey, this is not going to be easy for Pragg. Pawn up to c4. Very strong move by Karjakin, putting pressure in the center if Pragg ever takes on c4. Look at his pawns, all isolated and weak. Pragg develops his knight out to f6, and Karjakin also brings his knight in. There's a lot of pressure here, and notice if you play e6, then after c5 you are positionally busted as black. So Pragg takes his time, and he's like, I don't want to play e6 because c5 is very strong, but what are my options? How do I develop this bishop? If I play g6, it looks a tad slow. Maybe then the only option, real option, feels like taking on c4, and yes, your structure is then ruined, which Pragg does. He takes, but on the other hand, he gets a free flowing position, and also, you know, his bishops can then at least feel that the position is open. Karjakin says, this is my pawn, I'll take it whenever needed, and he castles it out, which is a good move. He understands the position very well. And Praggnanandhaa goes e6. Now, a best case scenario for Pragg would be to play the move c5. So, for example, if White were to take here, then maybe c5 is something that you should think of, although d5 is possible there. So, c5 is something that Pragg should be aiming for, and Karjakin would be looking to stop it. And there are many ways you can stop it, and one of them is queen f3 that Karjakin plays, because now if you go c5, then already d takes c5, bishop takes c5, and now knight comes out to e4. You can't take the knight, there's a mate here, and I'm already looking at these weaknesses. Rook coming to d1, that is terrible position. So Pragg goes rook to c8, and which is logical. He defends the pawn on c6, and once again keeps an eye out that if I get an option to play c5, I will play it. This is quite a positional battle going on between Karjakin and Pragg. Pragg looking at the demo boards there, the big screen where all the games are being broadcasted. He would be looking for his first win in the super tournament. This is his first ever super tournament, and he has been having a tough time there. Will he be able to fight back is the question. Now, what is Sergey thinking? One idea is rook d1. He goes bishop g5, which is again a beautiful move. He's pinning the knight here. Maybe he wants to bring his other rook to d1, then his other rook to e1. Pragg breaks the pin with bishop e7. Logical chess. But now rook comes to d1, rook e1, and white would have complete domination over the position. Karjakin taking his time. He knows that this position is really good, but what is the best way to grind it? Rook d1 played, which is a fine move here. And now it's clear that Pragg cannot easily play c5 because it opens up this file against the bishop and the queen. So short castle played here by black. And now Karjakin actually take this pawn. c5 could be possible when d5, but this is exactly the kind of position that Pragg wants, get it really complex, and then after takes here, bishop takes or a queen takes. Maybe this is already fine for black. The position has improved considerably. So in order to stop this, Karjakin is thinking, and he finds this nice little move, knight a4. You can see that he's controlling the c5 square. No longer can Pragg play this move, pawn up to c5. And now for Pragg, it's again decision time. Maybe a good idea here is to drop your bishop back to e8. But then the knight jumps to c5. And already it feels so scary because the knight is so well placed. And if you take, I take with the pawn, attacking the queen. And when the queen comes up, then the knight goes g4 and there is a pin here. And it is big trouble there for Pragg. So bishop dropping back to e8, while seems logical because there's a constant pressure by this knight on the bishop, it's still not solving everything. So Pragg can go for something where he's trying to exchange a few pieces. One idea that comes to mind is knight to d5 when the bishops can be traded. But for now, he's taking his time here. He is down to 2 minutes, 5 seconds. Pragg should be careful. First of all, his position is bad, but if he falls under big time trouble, then it would be almost impossible to salvage against a player of Karjakin's caliber. But one can completely understand the confusion that the kid is going through because his position is really not so great. And Pragg has taken a lot of time. He goes knight d5. He tells Sergey, would you like to trade the bishops? Which he does. Queen takes, and now the knight jumps into c5. Now there are 2 attacks on this bishop. So bishop goes back and Karjakin now takes the pawn on c4. This pawn is weak. a6, c6, both pawns are weak. Knights are beautiful. Bishop is not doing much. What is Pragg going to do? He's already 1 minute down on time. Karjakin is simply crushing this position. Well, time for first to improve this bishop, says Pragg. I'm going to play f6. Someday, I hope my bishop will pop out from here and look at this beautiful diagonal. Although, now knight takes a6 is actually a bad move because rook a8 and black gets counterplay against the a2 pawn. This is one thing that white doesn't want to be happening in the position, which is to let black get counterplay. One plan is e5. Because if you take d takes e5, the c5 knight is hanging. So once again, Karjakin's play will revolve around stopping this plan. And you can see he goes queen a3. Because now if Pragg goes here, he can simply chop off the pawn, which is actually very good for him and should be no problem. So the knight is defended. Karjakin in full prophylaxis mode here. Praggnanandhaa down to 1 minute 10 seconds. He goes bishop to f7. Makes sense here. He defends his pawn on e6. Karjakin puts further pressure down on the e6 pawn. Maybe Pragg should go rook fd8 because still none of the pieces can actually take on a6. If you take with the knight, then already I can exchange the queens here and then rook comes to a8 and that would be great. So Pragg can go rook fd8 without any trouble, but he goes rook a8. This is slightly passive, but Pragg is essentially saying to Sergey, what is your plan on improvement? Because now if you take on a6, you're simply blundering a piece. I'll take here, which is just lost. So you can't do that. But if you can't play that where is your plan to improve? Maybe knight a5, putting pressure on c6 makes a lot of sense there, and that is something that you may want to consider here. The other options actually include, he goes h3, and this is Karjakin's way of saying to Pragg, I am just trying to keep the position as it is and put pressure on you because you're down to 50 seconds. But I liked how Pragg quickly made his last move, rook e8, telling Karjakin that I also have a lot of waiting moves up my sleeve. Now Sergey Karjakin is thinking where to go next. Queen a4, interesting move. He wants to attack the c6 pawn, and Pragg now defends it with his queen on c7. Karjakin offers a trade of queens because now with the trade, this would be clearly better endgame for Karjakin, but Pragg is not going to trade the queens. He's down to 40 seconds. Queen b8. I love this move because now he's planning to come to b5, and if you ever take the queen, cb5 would improve my structure and also hit the knight. So this is very tricky play by Pragg. Very good move. Queen to b8. Karjakin plays his rook to c1, defending the knight on c4, and I think it's time for Pragg to play his move queen to b5, which he plays. And now of course you never want to trade. Karjakin instantly goes back with his queen. But the position, now look, knight d6 is a big threat. There is a fork here, so Pragg covers it. He covers the square, rook d8, and you can sense that there is some confidence in his body language. He can sense that his pieces are more coordinated. Knight e4 played. You're now trying to fork once again on d6. The queen and the rook. Praggnanandhaa has to decide. He's down to 24 seconds. Pragg, you need to make a move. Queen b4. I love this move. Very tricky. If you take, I take. a2 is hit. d4 is hit. d3, there is a fork. Too many problems. And I think this is where Karjakin needs to decide. He can play rook e d1, defending the queen and also defending the d3 square later on. But he mustn't take the queen. And if he does not take it, then he must find rook d1. But he's thinking. And look at his time. He's down to 43 seconds. Praggnanandhaa has 25 seconds. And Karjakin needs to make a move. You know, one of the most difficult things in chess is when you've been dominating the entire game and suddenly your advantage is slipping away. It's very difficult to reconcile yourself that now the position is no longer as great as it used to be. And there you can see Karjakin down to 20 seconds. He's taking a lot of pressure, and maybe this will give Pragg the chance he was looking for. He goes knight c5 back. And in fact, Pragg can now repeat with queen b5, although Karjakin would not repeat the position. But he plays a5 and he tells Sergey that I'm actually happy with my position. I'm ready to continue the game, which is quite sensible. a3 played, and now Pragg can actually chop off the queen and then move his knight. Yes, he does. He takes, knight takes, and now knight f4. Brilliant. Now this is attacked. And also there are threats of e5 because then this is hanging. So g3 is an important move here, but he goes rook e4. This is not a great move. e5 should be played by Pragg, but he finds a tactic. Rook takes, and there's a fork coming in. He takes on d4. Fantastic chess by Pragg. He's a pawn up, but still the black pawns are slightly weak. So it's not like complete advantage to Pragg. He is a pawn up, but white has great compensation. I like his next move, e5, activating his bishop here. Karjakin recovers his pawn, but look at the black pieces. Now they look so good in the center. Pragg now starts pushing his central majority. Karjakin is angling to push his queenside pawn. This is still a massive race here. e4 pushed, knight e3 would be excellent because then you can take the bishop, but instead he goes a4. And now Praggnanandhaa pushes his pawn even further. Knight b6 needs to be found by Karjakin, but he actually plays rook to c3. And now can Pragg find rook b8? He finds it, the best move in the position. Karjakin must find knight a6, rook a8, and then it would be a repetition, but he goes a5, blunders the pawn, and now this position is totally lost for white because Pragg's rook is now active, his pieces are active. He attacks the knight, king comes in, pawn up. And now you can see there, after rook takes a fork, and Praggnanandhaa has one material, which is amazing, and he plays another accurate move, hitting the knight and the pawn. Simply amazing chess there by Pragg. Karjakin was unable to handle the time pressure, and you can see there, He is completely losing now. Not only is he an exchange down, he's also a pawn down, and Pragg is very confident here. You can bank on Pragg not to fall into some knight forks here. Pragg plays his pawn up to h6, pawn g5, but in blitz chess you can never be sure. If you are careless, one knight fork and the game is over. But one good rule of thumb is that you can place your pieces on opposite color square. Like if the king is on a light square, you can put your rook on a dark square and they can never be forked. By the way, a discovered attack coming in. He plays his rook down, king up, and then the rook comes here, putting pressure on this pawn. He pushes forward, but now this pawn is going to be lost pretty soon. Pragg has 12 seconds. Karjakin has 16. Would this be the first ever win for Praggnanandhaa in the super tournament? That would be huge. King g5. Knight comes back to d3, attacking the rook. And now the rook moves back to e8. Knight b4. And Pragg plays his bishop to e4, saying, I won't even give you that pawn. And now he chops off the pawn on g6. He's 2 pawns up, completely in control. King comes up to g5. You can see how confidently the youngster is playing. And of course, he's just a grandmaster at this point. But already you can see the sparks of someone who is very, very special. Bishop goes back, gives a check to the king with the rook. King comes down, and it's time to push the g pawn down the board. g5. Now the knight attacks the rook. Rook comes in, attacking the knight. And now knight goes back to c2. Maybe you push the pawn even further. The knight is attacking the rook. And now the rook attacks the knight. This is nice geometry there. And knight d4 played. Pragg simply brings his king back. No checks. Should be able to disturb him there. And pawn to g3. Next up, rook coming in, and Karjakin resigns. Praggnanandhaa scores his first win of the tournament. What a game. He was worse out of the opening, but he kept his calm and scored a win. Amazing battle.